a Vassar, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District, and Leo Crisp, a retired employee of the North Syracuse Central School District. Okay, we'll move into presentations. I have the summer school report with Mr. Bowles.
Good evening. I'd like to start off with a few thank yous. Before we go with the summer school report, there are many people that are involved in trying to get the summer school up and running, and we usually start in the month of March, many months before summer school begins. And some of the people I'd like to thank are Jamie Sullivan, Bill LeClaire, Sally Myers, Joe Artuso, Larry Zaharik, Tim Bednarski, Wendy Swift, Diane Clancy, and Bob Gaetano. First, we have the results of the number of percentage of students that were passing each course. What we did, we made some last-minute changes to put a side-by-side comparison from the 2013-14 school year to 14-15. And as you can see, in many of the courses, as far as students passing, earning a unit of credit, there were some increases. For instance, Algebra 2 Trig ended up going from 91% to 100%, chemistry from 88% to 100%. Again, as you look at numbers, there are some numbers to the far left where there weren't that many students participating, so the percentages are either very high or percentages did come down. So these are all the courses, and our goal is to make sure that we can keep students on cohort and continue with their credits so that they can graduate within 4 years of time. With 7th and 8th, again, 2013-14, up a percent for Math 7, and as you can continue to go across, you can see some increases. We did have an issue in life science, but as I was telling you, the number of students that we had were 2, and so if 2 students did not pass, the percentage is 0. So the overall percentage as far as passing for this year was 76% for our 7th and 8th graders. Put up some numbers as far as enrollment 9 through 12, and as you can see for 2015, 343 students were enrolled, and the percent passing was 91%, which was up from 2014. For 7th and 8th grade, you can see in 2015, the number of students enrolled was down to 192. Percent passing was up to 76%. One of the things that we took a look at was the number of students that failed multiple classes, and were not being successful in the previous year. So we were not allowing students to take 3 classes if they were not looking in 7th and 8th, if they were not being successful, because that made it was a 6-hour day, and you're talking about students who were struggling initially. So that was an executive decision, and it looks like the percentages stayed up, and our overall enrollment of 192, which was a 98 student difference, and we pay per student or per course at BOCES, so ended up also being a savings there. So for August Regents, as you can see, have a listing of how we did in the August Regents. Now, if you remember from the previous slides, we have a number of students that are passing the courses, but the percentages on the Regents in August does not correlate, or there's a disconnect with the kids that are passing the Regents versus passing the courses. So if you take a look, you're at Earth Science was down to 42% passing the Regents. Global down to 24% passing the Regents. The algebra was 35%, living environment 15%, U.S. history, trigonometry 52%, and chemistry 36%. On October 29th, I have a meeting with the assistant superintendent with BOCES and the coordinator for BOCES for summer school to talk about summer school as a whole, but this is one of the talking points. We've already had an initial discussion when we were looking at the grades, because you have a higher percent of passing, but as far as students being able to pass the Regents, they're not being as successful. Other classes that we're running in the summer are review classes, summer review classes for the following courses, and APEX, or otherwise known as credit recovery. These are students that, for summer review classes, the students would have passed the course, earning a credit for the course, but failed the Regents, so they don't need to sit the entire time in a BOCES summer school class to get credit because they already have it. They just need to pass the Regents. So we have an abbreviated summer review classes, and they come in and the teachers work with them to pass Regents courses. APEX, we have students, or it's otherwise known as credit recovery, where it's computer-based and students are coming in and working, and Linda Sammons coordinates that program up at the high school. Some of the other additional information is because of the length of time that the students are at summer school, and we had a few projects going on, so our cafeteria area was under construction. So again, Wendy Swift did a phenomenal job. We tweaked some things, and she did get people working up kind of at a side table, selling snacks and things for kids getting to summer school, and we did also put some vending machines so they can get juice or water to keep them hydrated during the summer. All students who had IEPs were provided support in class, or a special class was available to them outside of the course class that they were taking. Chemistry and Algebra 2 Trig Regents was offered, and in the past it had not been offered in the summer for the last 5 years. So this was a first, and we were one of very few in our area that was offering this Regents for students. And we knew that the Algebra 2 Trig Regents was very difficult in June, so we offered that to make sure that students had an opportunity to earn that credit in August. We continue to provide transportation for summer school, and this is something that is not mandated. We often have calls that come in from parents wanting to change stops and get the service that we do during the year, but we aren't mandated to provide any transportation this summer, but we do, but it's a little bit more condensed as far as combining stops where there are group stops that students have to go to in order to be bused to the high school. And the last comment is that BOCES runs our summer school. We no longer run it ourselves, and the site's been at CNS for quite some time. And as you know, we're looking at a roof project at the junior high school in order to do some things that we need to do in the summer. And also, due to cleaning and technology needs, we need to move the summer school site next year to Beeville, and that's the other district that comes to us in the summer, in order for us to do those necessary repairs and upgrades. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
You had mentioned the Regents exam results from taking the tests over in August, and the results are very alarming to me, and I know you said you were going to set up a meeting with BOCES, but what recourse do these students have that have passed the course but have failed the Regents in August? I mean, they're not going to take the class over again.
No, if they have course credit, they don't have to take the class over again. They can take the Regents over. There's a January Regents where they can take an opportunity to take that Regents exam again in January.
And is there a review class for that Regents exam. If they haven't passed it in June and they haven't passed it in August, likely they're not going to pass it in January unless they have more review.
I will check with the high school to see what they have to offer as far as any review sessions. I'm not aware of that at the current time.
Thank you, Dan. Have no comments from the audience. Do we have any board committee reports?
We're meeting next week.
The only comment that I had is we received an email pertaining to the tax exemption for the village of Syracuse. Connie sent out that backup information. The request came the day after the article was in the paper. Has not, as far as I know. He reached out to you now?
Yes, we do have a phone message now, and Mr. Keegan and I will be contacting him tomorrow to set up a meeting to hear what he has.
So I'm assuming that the comments that were in the paper were from the previous request versus this request, because this is different economic climate than it was before, and also mostly a different board. I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of all of that. That's why Connie sent that backup information. Each?
I just have one piece of good news to share this evening. Assemblyman Sturpey has nominated 3 high school students from our area for the Presidential Scholarship Program, and one of those students is a CNS senior, Tiffany Lane, who's been nominated for an academic scholarship. We'll go to the next round. We're hoping that she goes to the next round, which is the Teachers Advisory Council of the New York State Education Department. And then after that, the final step would be 10 nominees to the National Commission for Presidential Scholars. So just the fact that Tiffany's been nominated is a huge...
Thank you. Action items. Do I have a motion to take A, B, and C group? Mr. Marizio, Ms. Scanlon, all in favor? Discussion items. We have advanced placement and Regents results. Sir?
All right, good evening. So we're going to go over the June Regents data along with the AP results from the exams that were taken in May. So the first slide that you'll see is the 3-year trend and how we've done over the past 3 years. And then the next slide after that will show where the students scored and the scoring breakdown. So first we have English, and this is the 2005 standards. So this year we'll be going Common Core as we transition in ELA and math. So for the past 3 years, we've scored over 90% in English, doing very well. Large percentage of our kids score in the 85 to 100 range. Here we have U.S. history. Again, made a nice little increase from the year before. And the majority of our students are scoring in the 85 to 100 range.
Global history, it continues to be a struggle for our students. It is a 2-year exam taken over 9th and 10th grade at the end of the 10th grade year, and unfortunately, they do struggle with the content. We've noticed that the reading level has increased dramatically over the past several years. Phrasing and word tense usage has changed, and the grading scale continues to be more and more difficult each year. So last year, we did go down a little bit from the previous year. And we are, the students that did pass, we do have a majority of students in the 85 to 100 range, but we do have a big chunk of our students in the 65 to 84 range. So we need to continue working with them in AIS services to try to get those scores up to mastery level.
environment, doing very well here. Again, 3 years in a row, over 90%. Chemistry. 65 to 84 range. Physics, we did increase from the year before. Again, keep in mind when looking at this data that we've only tested 145 students. Those students that are in our honors track take physics in their 9th grade year. Already are in the 65 to 80.
So though,
Yeah.
those 9th grade students are still taking the Regents because it's at a different school.
They're not
That's
included in
not
this.
in our,
Yep.
yep. All right, geometry. Again, this is the 2005 standards as we this Common Core. We did make a nice little increase there. Our students in their 65. All right, Algebra 2 Trig. We did line here in this. This was a tough exam. Keep in mind, 10% of our students that took this exam scored in the 60 to 64 range. So, you know, at 10% it could have helped. This is the last year that we're giving this. This was the last year we're giving this exam. Now Algebra 2, which is Common Core. Now we'll transition into the AP. This just shows the number of exams.
You'll notice that there's a little bit of a decline in the number of tests, but we have to keep in mind that we have had lower enrollment. Last year and this year, the class as a whole, the sizes are bigger, but the past few years, we've had fewer and fewer students. So we believe that that's accounting for the fact that we're about 150 tests fewer than we were the previous year.
Next two slides will show that our students scoring 3 or better. At 60% of our students score 3 or better, with 7 exams increasing in this area.
Are the classes that, where are they being taught? The ones that we're seeing credit for on this page, but not.
Okay, so the Calculus BC and the World History class. The World History class is our European history class, which 10th graders take. So they can opt to take the test, and the same thing is with Calculus. They can opt to take the additional test.
Basically testing, they're just testing out of a class.
Not testing out, they're just getting an additional credit, the additional credits from College Board by taking the extra class, or test, I'm sorry.
Test, not a class.
Look like everybody.
Yeah.
But we are running 2 sections. Questions?
Okay, so we'll move into discussion action items. Authorization for the capital reserve. Do I have a motion? Ms. Scanlon? And call? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, the acceptance of the report of the independent auditor. Did anybody have a chance to read this like I did? This was why we were late coming into the meeting.
Presentation. Thanks, Don. As Patrick mentioned earlier, we had a brief audit committee meeting prior to the meeting here, and as he mentioned, there's in your packages is quite a bit of information about the audited financial statements. I'm Michael Hassan. I'm the partner in charge of the engagement who signs the audit reports for you and oversees all the work performed by my staff. We have a pretty simple presentation here to walk you through high level. As Patrick mentioned, we spent probably over an hour discussing the financial statements, the different drafts that are in your packages, and I'll just highlight some of the points here. Executive summary is we actually have a clean audit opinion, what we call unmodified audit opinion in all your reports we issue. There's actually technically 3 different types of audit reports we issue for you. One is on your basic financial statements. Another one is on your grant compliance called the A133 report. Another one's on your ECA, your extra classroom activity funds. Actually, all 3 of those reports are separate reports that we actually give what we call a clean opinion, unmodified. Although on the ECA report, we have a slight modification for what we call cash receipts. Very similar to all our school districts is because of the controls and procedures in place for overseeing cash receipts, most accounting firms such as mine and everybody else scopes that out of the opinion, saying we're not, sure that everything is in there, but what we do see in there is properly accounted for. So pretty standard, acceptable in the practice, and no different than all the other school districts I see. We also discussed some of our auditors' communications. These are requirements we discussed with the audit committee and the full board, but just to point out that we had no major difficulties with staff working with Don, Vince, his team, preparing the financial statements, doing the audit procedures. Got through everything, including getting the actuarial report on Friday at 4 o'clock, which was put through your financial statements. It was about 4 or 5 pages in your financial statements of that information. But we were able to make the board meeting timely, and his team works pretty hard to get all that information in there. As you can see, those reports are fairly long. A couple other things in here that was new this year is GASB 68. That was something I mentioned in the past to the past board and the audit committee. GASB 68 is the accounting for pensions. In the past, your fund financial statements are basically a cash basis financial statement. Your basic entity-wide financial statements include other things such as assets and liabilities for long-term liabilities or capital assets that are recorded in those financial statements. This past year was a major new accounting pronouncement called GASB 68, which actually records the proportionate share of your pension liability or obligation, to the TRS or ERS systems and or an asset. Surprisingly enough, this year is we actually have about a $51 million asset related to TRS. What that is the proportionate share of the assets at the plan. The school district has about 0.35% of that asset is recorded on your books and records now as an asset, because ultimately what's happened is over time you've paid in enough money, and based on their actuarial analysis at the state, you actually record a $51 million asset to your books. Unlike ERS, which is actually in a liability position, that's about 0.03%. That represents about a $2 million liability. As I mentioned, to the audit committee, these numbers can swing quite a bit every year, but don't impact your fund financial statements, not cash basis. It's accrual base where it's based on estimates of the actuarial. There's actually a footnote table in there showing the increase or decrease of just 1%, and that asset could drop from $51 million to down to $900,000 with just a simple 1% change. And that's really estimates that are out of the control of the board, because those estimates are made by the plan themselves. So that was a pretty big implementation for school districts this year and any government. Most school districts, because you're June 30th year end, were the first ones to see this happening. So as you hear, 1231 numbers come out on, villages and towns and counties, you'll see the same type of, big assets or liabilities recorded in their books and records too. First year it's required is this year. That was the biggest thing that happened in accounting this past year for you. But there is quite a few things on the timeline coming forward that I'm working with the team here to make sure you stay compliant with. It's ever changing in accounting standards and compliance standards, and Don and his team has done an excellent job of staying on top of that and staying compliant. One of the bullet points here is about control observations, recommendations. This is requirements. We had no what we call material weaknesses, internal controls to discuss in front of the board or the audit committee. We have a couple administrative recommendations on some cleanup items and some detail. Nothing to be of significance there. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, an audit report on the single audit, or called A133. We have what we call an unmodified opinion there. We have no material non-compliance with findings. Now, what that means is we test certain aspects of your grants. We tested, there's about $7 million total federal grants that passed through this past fiscal year. We test about 2.5–3 million of that, and that's really formula driven on what we test, but we found no material non-compliance with those. As I mentioned to the audit committee, if we find material non-compliance with items, especially if it's a dollar value associated with it, as I mentioned, the state of New York, the Department of Education will request a refund of those monies almost about 5 minutes after we submit this to the state, or you approve them. So what we work with is with the management of, the school district to make sure that the compliance and anything new changes, that they're in front of those before we come out and audit them. Because sometimes what we see as auditors is a little bit too late, and we see it after it should have been implemented. But they've done a nice job of staying in compliance with all the new regulations, and there's quite a few new regulations taking impact next year, as they really have gone away what they call the single audit to what they now just refer to as a code. I'm not a lawyer by trade, but it's called 2 CFR 200. They haven't really renamed it, but it's actually called the Super Circular. And there's a lot of new regulations or requirements for grant compliance with that we'll be starting to test compliance with those new standards going forward next year. So, last point here was extra classroom activities, ECA. As you know, these are the clubs and activities of the students here. We do give you an opinion on those reports. At the end of the day, there's about $300,000 at the start of the year, $300,000 at the end of the year of total activity. We do have a couple control recommendations on there concerning following policies and procedures, and we discussed that with the audit committee in more detail. But I think the school is just working on retraining and refocusing on some of those policy procedures, some of those clubs. But from our standpoint, we don't feel those rise to material weakness and internal controls or a significant deficiency. Overall, very good year for audit. No significant items to discuss, and just hats off to Don and his team. Just gets more and more to stay compliant with, and more regulations that we as auditors look for. So, good job overall.
Questions? Unmodified and no material weakness. Right to that and read that. So very thankful for the business office that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion to accept the auditor's report. Ms. Cash, Ms. Scanlon, all in favor? Unanimous? A amendment to the annual organizational meeting. Do we need any explanation to this? Make a motion to accept. C. Scanlon, all in favor? Fair Rubbish Removal has donated $3,000 annually for the first 5 years per the North Syracuse Central School District Scoreboard Sponsorship Contract. These funds will be placed in the special aid. The recommended action is to approve this resolution. Do I have a motion? Ms. Cash, Ms. Scanlon? All in favor? That's you. Have acknowledgement of gifts. Anne Marie Leaf made a donation to the North Syracuse Central School District Smith Road Elementary School of books through AKJ Books and Donors Choose. The value of the books are approximately $750. I always butcher her last name. Sue Maniaci made a donation to the North Syracuse Central School District Smith Road Elementary books through Amazon and Donors Choose. The value of the books are approximately $650. Eyes in the Air camera tripods donated to the North Syracuse Central School District. An end zone tripod system, which will be used at the CNS football with the CNS football program to film electronically from the end zone. The gift is valued at $2,820. The recommended action is that we accept with gratitude these above gifts. Rafaelia, second Mr. Schuster, all in favor? Contract agreement with Food Services Bargaining Unit. Do I have a motion? Ms. Cash, Mr. McClintock, all in favor of that? Unanimous. The personnel reports A, B, and C. Do we need an executive session? Can we approve? Mr. Marizio will make the motion. Second, Mr. Schuster, all in favor? That's unanimous. And make a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of receiving an update on negotiations with the principals bargaining unit and the directors bargaining unit, and to review the employment record of 6 individuals with action to follow on 1 employment matter. Motion, Mr. Marizio, second, Ms. Cash, all in favor? That's unanimous. Students, participation of government students, anybody with a pen can sign for you tonight.